see, what do we know about phonics and bilingual readers? There's a whole space of studies that show that bilingual children have got greater phonological awareness, okay? We know that. We know that although early phoneme awareness and phonics training can accelerate the word recognition and spelling skills of both first and second language learners, comprehension skills are unaffected. Okay? And I think the challenge for classroom teachers here is it doesn't matter what the government is telling you to do, it doesn't affect that. Right? It does not affect, it does not help children to develop their comprehension skills. And so the inevitable conclusion of that is that undue emphasis should not be placed on decoding skills with children operating in a second language. It doesn't mean to say that children do not require phonics skills. I'm not saying that at all. This is a completely unnecessary polarization. The two main studies that have, because there's actually been relatively little research on this, one of the studies is by Hutchinson and what they say is that they talk about seeing the bigger picture. A child with good decoding skills may give the impression of having good reading skills, and as a consequence, poor comprehension skills may not be identified. As children with poor language skills progress onto texts that challenge decoding ability, the storyline with a text is likely to go beyond their level of understanding. Failure to provide the necessary language support in the early years of education may lead to a poorer pattern of reading comprehension achievement for many children learning English as an additional language. Does that speak to your experience? Yes. Another really important study by Stewart. Yeah? Again, an appeal that attention to phonics should not take place in isolation from activities which promote vocabulary building, meaning making and comprehension. It might be prudent to err on the side of caution when teaching ESL to children, that is, devise ways of fostering their L2 oral language comprehension and explicitly focus on reading comprehension as well as phonics. Yeah? So, you know, I think for me this just reinforces the political nature of the current emphasis on synthetic phonics. There is no pedagogical foundation for it whatsoever. Okay, it's all very well knocking something down, but what should we be doing? Well, I'm sorry folks, but I don't have a sort of magic sort of 5-point formula or even a 10-point formula. But I think few people explain the situation or put the alternative approach more eloquently than Michael Rosen.
Live around it, riding through the forest.
If we're lucky, one of our earliest and warmest memories will be being read a wonderful book, sinking into a story and becoming part of it. I certainly had that experience with 2 teacher parents. My brother and I had all the books we could read and all the encouragement to read them. And being book-loving children, there's little doubt that we'd do okay at school.
Today, though, I think there have been some worrying changes in the way in which we teach children to read. Instead of trying to instill a love of books in children, we're obsessed with all kinds of strategies, new fashionable strategies from here and there, giving children books that are stuffed full of word lists and letters. Is it any wonder that children are leaving school unable to read? Governments are very good at passing on a sense of urgency, some would say anxiety, around the matter of education. Currently, both Labour and the Tories are grasping at the idea that synthetic phonics is the cure-all for teaching reading. But the reality is that phonics will never be enough to teach reading, and there will always be some children who fail to pick it up, no matter which teaching method is in vogue.
And children who the government and schools are failing are the very children who don't have books at home. And this is one of the major ways in which we're socially divided. It's a disgrace that there isn't the same urgency
that the government is putting into phonics as there is in getting children to love books.
So I've got my own strategy for improving literacy in our schools, and it's not about targets, tests or scores. It's about creating a book-loving culture, both at school and at home. And if we don't, we're never going to reach out to the kids who really need help.
Every school should have a staff member who acts as a homeschool liaison to talk to parents about how to read books with their children. Every school should run a proper library with a paid librarian, hold regular book events, get authors in, and at least once a week let children talk about their books in an open-ended way.
It sounds so obvious, but learning to read begins and ends with wonderful, exciting, colourful books like these. Let's stop pretending that phonics will solve everything and start concentrating on developing a book-loving culture that all children will benefit from.
It's very interesting that there is this total unanimity on the part of children's authors. Yes, I mean, I suppose they do have they do have a vested interest in selling their books. But I think in my experience of children's authors, they are people who love children, who love stories, and are interested and have children's best interests at heart. This is a letter that was written to The Guardian in 2010 and was signed by over 90 children's authors. So we are writers and artists who produce books for children. In our view, the proposed draft primary English curriculum, the phonics screening check at the end of year 1, and the new spelling, punctuation and grammar test at the end of year 6 pose a threat to reading for pleasure in primary schools. The recent Ofsted report, Moving English Forward, made a specific recommendation to the government that it call on all schools to develop policies on reading for enjoyment. To date, there has been no such move by government. On the other hand, millions are being spent on systematic synthetic phonics programs and training, subsidised by the government, although there is no evidence that such programs help children understand what they are reading. As a result, more school time will be devoted to reading as an academic, test-driven exercise. Less time will be available for reading and writing for enjoyment. We deplore this state of affairs and consider that the quality of children's school lives is about to be altered for the worse. So that really is the crux of the argument. What I've been trying to put across is the fact that there is no research evidence. The evidence from the people in this room, if I'm not misreading you, is that it does not work. It does not work on the ground. When you track the politics of this, you get a very clear view of what the political motivation for this is. I'm going to end where Steve actually, where you started in a sense, talking about this Rose report with a little personal anecdote, and it's nice because I've got somebody in this room that can back this up. Between the publication of the interim Rose report and the final report, 4 of us from NALDIC went along as a delegation from NALDIC because the first iteration, the interim report, made no reference to EAL kids in any shape or form. They must have added at least 3 or 4 sentences the next time round, see, so we achieved something. Jim Rose I was sort of quite pleasantly surprised. He was very attentive, and we spent 2 hours with him. And we got to the end of the first hour, and he said, we will definitely be coming out in favour of synthetic phonics. So the conversation goes something like this. What about the report that the DFES produced last month, which said that there was no research evidence in favour of synthetic phonics. And he says, well, the research tells you nothing. And he has a point. He says, we're not basing it on research, we're basing it on visits to 24 primary schools. And so that must mean, yeah, okay. 24 primary schools, and we saw the best practice in the schools that were using synthetic phonics. Pause. Could that possibly have been because the only commercially available materials are synthetic phonics? Yeah, maybe. Actually, I have to admit, sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference. Steve, am I telling the truth?
Yes.
Yes. Next intervention. Maybe we would be more easily persuaded if you were dealing with a language like Spanish, where the sound letter correspondences were more regular. No, there's not a problem. There's not a problem with English. 70% of the words of English are perfectly regular. Silence. Give me a word with an irregular spelling. I'll show you. Pause. Friend. Bigger pause. Think of another word with IE. Big pause. Retrieve. There you are. I rest my case.